Hey, GW coming to you live. Hey, couple of things before I get into today's movie review, which is a real crazy piece of film. We'll get there in a minute. But I was scrolling on my Google feed about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, something like that. And they are actually going to reboot The Toxic Avenger. Now, I'm a big Trauma fan, always have been, the earlier stuff. Class of Nukem High, Toxic Avenger, Surf Nazis Must Die, that type of thing. So when I read they were going to do a reboot, I was kind of skeptical. I was on the fence, and I was like, well, with today's PC atmosphere, the way the older movie was shot, you could never do it. You can never do it because the movie in 1984 was so un-PC, so graphically violent, so awesome, I guess you could say. And for those of you who don't know the general story, it's about a weakling that works in a health club who is bullied, and some of the local jocks, they pull a prank on him, and he ends up running out of the health club, diving out of the second floor window, in classic superhero stuff, lands in a vat of toxic waste, transforms from a weakling and a puny, sort of idiot to a massive hulking superhero that ends up cleaning up the town, actually. And the movie, as I just said, was very graphic, very violent. And, my movie review will pretty much explain to you what I feel about that movie. But when I read about it, Legendary Pictures picked it up. And from what I read on Google, it was supposed to come out in December of 2020. Well, just recently, it was announced that Peter Dinklage is going to star, Julia Davis, Elijah Wood, and rounding out the cast is Kevin Bacon. Now, the way that I would redo this movie is that I would take Peter Dinklage, make him the weakling. I would take Kevin Bacon and make him the evil conglomerate CEO bad guy. And I would make Elijah Wood as the sidekick, and Julia Davis I would make as an investigator. And you could pretty much fill in the pieces. So I'm on the fence to see what they're going to do, and I have a pretty good idea of what they might try to do. However, the thing that bothers me is that if you go back to that original film, you can never duplicate the violence in that film. You can never duplicate the un-PC attitude that film had. That film pulled no punches. That film was graphic, in your face, and tasteless on a couple of levels. But my fear is that if you go try to reduplicate the 1984-85 movie and make it into today's standards, you're not going to pull it off just right, because you're not going to be able to show the graphic violence. Critics are going to be up in arms. You can't have the jokes and the satire that the first one had. You also can't push the envelope too far. That being said, I wonder if they're going to make two versions of the film. You know how like they did back in the 80s? They would put, or the early 90s, I should say, they would say, okay, here's the TV version. Here's the theatrical version, rather. Here's the unrated version. I wonder if they're going to pull something like that. But Legendary Pictures, pretty well-known studio, they might be able to pull it off. I just hope to God they do it right. Like I said, I'm a big Toxic Avenger fan. 1 and 4, you can miss 2 and 3. 3 was pretty campy in and of itself, where he fought the devil, and it was usually aired on USA Up All Night. The trilogy was, circulated. Gilbert Gottfried, yeah, I remember that. I don't know if you guys remember that at all, but that's definitely worth taking a look. Now, I'm going to talk about a crazy movie that I just got done watching called Death Spa. Death Spa was put out by Gorgon Video, and it stars Frank McCarthy, Rosalind Cash, William Bumler, Brenda Bake, okay, Robert Lipton and Ken Foree and a host of others. And basically, this movie is crazy from the word jump. It's about a owner of a health club whose wife committed suicide. Her spirit is now haunting every piece of exercise equipment there and basically taking out excuse me, taking out the patrons one at a time. However, this is definitely an 80s film. You can tell by the atmosphere and the fact that this was probably shot when the health club craze was in full effect. You know, again, going back to the Toxic Avenger, that's why that film was shot in a health club too. I mean, that was the thing. For a long time, health clubs were like, you know, you weren't cool unless you went to a health club. You know what I mean? And then you got all that gym talk, which came later. But, you know, that was definitely a thing. So, anyway, this is put out by Gorgon Video. Gorgon Video, of course, did the infamous Faces of Death series. And I've never done a review on those, but you can look those up. Those are sort of some of the most lurid, tasteless, graphic, semi-quasi documentaries that have ever graced the silver screen, and you can read all about it. They also put out a couple other movies, one called Frankenstein 80. That was a big one. And then, of course, Death Spa. They put out a whole bunch of other stuff. They've actually acquired the rights to Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, which is one of my favorite horror films of all time. However, this goes from being straight gory to campy to absurd, and it actually works. And the reason it works is because it's not done in a slasher sort of way. It's done as a build-up. The first accident, if you will, is not that graphic. And you try to put the pieces together on why the dead wife is doing this. The one thing I will say, though, is that this has the look down, Ken Foree's down. It's not going to keep everybody glued to the TV, but it will actually entertain you if you give it a minute. Now, the one thing about this film is that the gore really doesn't shine through until the conclusion of the film. There are hints here and there, and some of the kills are very, very bloody, and it's that rubber dissolving sort of makeup, and chlorine seems to be the weapon of the killer's choice, if you will. So give Death Spa a ring. I know it's a hard to find Blu-ray DVD, but you can get it off Amazon. I know whenever I ordered it, there was only like one copy left. So there's that. I also want to talk about something else that I read. If you guys haven't noticed, I saw the trailer for a movie called Don't Breathe Part 2. And I'm going to tell you something. If you guys haven't seen Don't Breathe Part 1, you guys need to check that out, especially if you're a horror fan. Don't Breathe 1 is one of the most surprising, awesome horror films you'll ever see. And it concerns a group of teenagers who want to rob from a blind man. They think it's an easy in and out. Oh, they are wrong. This boy is like Charles Bronson meets Jason Voorhees. I mean, this boy is badass, and I'm telling you what, it's one of the best films you'll ever see, and it's a hell of a thriller. So, anyway, check out the trailer for Don't Breathe 2, because it switches the sides. In the first one, the blind man was terrorized, and he whoops ass. Or he defended himself. This time, the blind man plays the victim. It's a nice little switch. So definitely give that a whirl. But yeah, definitely keep your eyes on the Toxic Avenger reboot. I'm sure more and more people will come forward because that was a big movie. And I remember when I first rented that, I mean, I didn't know nothing about no special effects. I didn't know basically anything about movie magic. I thought that was real, you know. And that film, when you're 6 or 7 years old, will scar you and stay with you. And it's unforgettable. So, you know, I hope a new generation can feel that way about that type of film. Also, no surprise, Last Drive-In has been renewed for a fourth season, and I cannot wait because the third season kicked ass. If you guys haven't seen it on Shudder, definitely check it out. Couple of new Blu-ray titles coming out real quick. Mortuary was an 80s horror film. It's now getting its Blu-ray release. You can look that up on Amazon. They are reissuing The House on Sorority Row from the 1980s, which is definitely a nice touch because every time I went to go buy that film, it was either 50 to 60 bucks. Too much for me to spend. But it's coming out. I think it's only like 30, 32, something like that. Definitely look into that. So, yeah, other than that, and there's no news on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre reboot as of right yet. Now, I do know, too, that being immersed in the world of horror, that the Last of Us TV show has started filming. And if you guys ever played the video game, all the fans of that game are looking forward to the TV show and they want it done right. But it has begun filming. So that is a good sign. So that means somewhere along the line, maybe by September, we will have the first season. So that's what I can say. But definitely check out Death Spawn. And if you don't know about Gorgon Video, check that out too. And like I said, keep your eye on the Toxic Avenger reboot because, like I said, if Elijah Wood and Peter Dinklage are in it, it should be pretty awesome. Anyway, tomorrow we will review another movie and we'll see what happens. If somehow you guys missed that video, I want everybody out there to have a great 4th of July and I want you to blow yourself up. You know what I'm saying? Can't have that. Can't have, people blowing up, playing with fireworks or catching on fire, So I hope y'all stay safe. Anyway, GW, and I hope you check out the movies.